Welcome to Kitsap Roots. I'm Carolyn May, and today in this video we are going to go over how to propagate herbs from cuttings. I'll go through all of the basic steps. It's not complicated. I promise you after this you'll have all the tools and information you're going to need, from how to cut your cuttings, how to plant your cuttings, how to care for your cuttings, and how to enjoy them once they're growing in your landscape. It's really easy. Just watch, see what you can figure out, and I really hope you give it a try. There's a number of reasons why you would even want to try this. Curiosity is a really good one. I got into propagation just to see if I could make it work. There was, well, you ever buy basil and they always say, put your basil into water and see if you grow roots. Yeah, I tried that. I've rooted onions in water and green onions, and if I can get roots, I will try growing it. And this has just grown over time to me growing a lot more plants. I recently became a master gardener, and now it's just a personal challenge of what can't I propagate. Today we're just going to focus on herbs, really simple, and the information here, once you get a hang of this, you can take this and go try different plants like sedum and hydrangea and Paris and ninebark. There's so many things you can propagate this way. Let's get started. It's late summer in Western Washington, which means most of the plants are nearing the end of their growing cycle for the season. So the type of cuttings that we're going to be focusing on today are called semi-hardwood cuttings. When you take your cuttings, here I have some rosemary. It's best to do it in the morning on a cool day. If you know you're going to do cuttings the night before, go out, really do a deep, good watering of the plant, and that's going to make sure all of the stems are fully hydrated all the way to the tips. If you don't, if you're finding that your cuttings are really limp looking, they're not going to be vigorous enough to root. So it's really important that you have good, strong, healthy, hydrated stems. Using nice clean snips, make sure your cuttings are, I would say, 4 to 6 inches. Longer is better. Your final cutting will be anywhere from 2 inches to 4 inches. So keep that in mind. This one was one whole branch, and you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 shoots on this one branch. Rosemary is a woody perennial, so the stems down at the bottom, once I strip away this yumminess. Oh, and when you're doing herbs and cuttings, you're doing herbs. They're delicious. So don't toss this stuff. You take this, you go make some pasta sauce, and you enjoy yummy dinner. So let's take a look at this rosemary stem. It has a bunch of different branches on it, and I took one off here to show you and stripped off a whole bunch of the leaves. At the base where it was attached to the plant, this is a really mature stem. It's really firm. If I bend it, it breaks really easily. If you move up the stem, it changes from dark brown to more of a lighter brown, and eventually the stem turns green at the top. Right in this middle where it's transitioning from dark brown up to the tip, this is your semi-hardwood portion. It's semi-ripe. Eventually, by the end of the season, it would be just as firm as the rest of this, but right now it's still somewhat pliable. This right here has a good opportunity for rooting. So we're going to take our snips and we're going to cut just below a node. All right, let's pause for a minute. What exactly is a node? Well, let me show you. On this sage over here, if I can, there we go. Oh, this is 2 of them. Isn't that fun? Okay, cut this one off. So if you look at this sage plant, you notice how the leaves come off the stem in pairs, and they're at equal distances from each other, right? Each one of those sets of leaves where the leaves branch off the stem is a node. And then the spaces between are the internodes. That's really important when you're talking about doing cuttings, because most plants root along where the nodes are on the stem. So when you're looking at your cutting, like this one, you cut just below a node, because that means right there is all of the cells and energy that will cause it to root. And it might even root at the next one as well. I can actually show you guys this too. I have some pineapple sage cuttings here that I just rooted in water. And if you look at this, you can see there was a node right here. and there was a node at the bottom. Look at how many roots grew at that bottom node. But then here we have these ones. And then in between, there are teeny tiny little hairs, but really no roots growing. That's sage or pineapple sage. Some plants, they don't care. Like, they'll just root anywhere. Hydrangea is one of those. So this hydrangea, let me show you this. This has just been sitting in water, and you can see all up the stem, there are roots trying to come off of this little tiny hydrangea. Hydrangea are another fun one to do. I rooted a bunch of those a couple years ago and ended up with 36 hydrangea. They make great presents, so I gave a lot of them away. All right, back to herbs. So here's my little cutting. I have 1, 2, I'm gonna do one more set of leaves, snip these off. 3 nodes. And then I'm also going to trim off the top. There's a few reasons for that. On a lot of plants, they might flower, say lavender, right? You get those beautiful flowers off the top. Anytime the plant is flowering, it's taking energy away from your cutting. So you want to remove that and focus the energy down by the roots. The other reason to trim off some of the excess leaves is, remember we talked that it was important that the cuttings stay hydrated. So if you remove some of the leaves lose hydration via evaporation, right? So cutting off some of the leaves makes it so that they can sustain themselves through photosynthesis without drying off. I pre-moistened my potting mix here, and the rosemary has a thick stem, slides right in really easily. Other ones, having a skewer is really, really helpful. When you're looking to plant all of your cuttings, the medium does matter. It's important to think about what the plant needs, right? Plants at this stage, or cuttings at this stage, they have no roots, which means they're not consuming nutrients as food, which is what the roots do in a plant, right? So having a medium, like regular potting soil with fertilizers and stuff in it can actually increase the chances of fungus and rot and other things in your cuttings. So the best thing to use for your potting medium is something more like perlite and peat moss. An equal portion of perlite and peat is really great. You can even do florist foam, just something to hold it steady that stays hydrated, but it's not just sitting in water. Some plants like sitting in water, other plants don't, right? So there's lots of different options when it comes to planting medium, but something sterile, soilless, that's what you're looking for. All right, so back on prepping a cutting. We're gonna remove some of these leaves on this sage, it's purple sage. Again, we're gonna look for our node. I'm gonna cut just below that node right there, and here's your cutting. So with your clean tool, make a dibble inside. And there's another cutting. The stages of development for the cutting. So once you put in there, great, now what? You wait, and you wait, and you wait. Usually it takes anywhere from, some plants are really vigorous and they root in a week. Others, it can take 8 to 10 weeks. It really just depends. And so that's one of those, if you do a little research, type in what you're trying to propagate into a search engine, you can get some pretty good information there too on specific plants. Now that I've shown you a couple cuttings here, the sage and the rosemary, okay, let's just do one more. Here's thyme. Here's another woody perennial. All of these are more of a woody perennial, meaning that in most climates, I'm in zone 8, so these ones just are regular perennial. They come back every season. I know in milder climates, you might have to replant some of these. Another reason to take cuttings, right? You bring it inside, you have your little plant growing over winter, new plants for next year. It's awesome. Okay, so thyme. Hardwood, ripe cutting on the end. As you move up, notice here's a stem, here's a stem, here's a stem, here's a stem, here's one. So this one, that was 6. I could take 6 cuttings off of this because where it comes off of the stem, those are gonna be this year's growth. And if you look at it, you can even see pretty easily on thyme, the stem is very green up towards the tip and transitions into that semi-hardwood towards the base. So I'm going to snip off a couple of these guys. How about those three? Same concept. I'm gonna strip off some nodes here. Another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at it, actually I'm gonna make this one a little shorter because the nodes were kind of far apart for this thyme plant. The farther apart the nodes are, the older it is and the harder it is for it to root. So look for your cuttings that have pretty close together nodes and you should be good. What else? Let's do one more. If you have one like this that has a few branches on it, I could strip off, oops, took one of them off. Oh well. So I clean this. Even if you have one node below the soil, that's all you really need. And I'm gonna put that in there. When you put your cuttings into the soil, don't stab it to the bottom because what happens then is once it does root, you're gonna get that circling of roots right at the base and it can cause it to be root bound and can cause it to get waterlogged and stress. So kind of think of keeping the end of the cutting right in the center of your container. What kind of containers work? Anything with drainage. I showed you this earlier, but this is a little coffee cup. I poked some holes in the bottom, make sure we have good drainage. I put some perlite in here and there is a thyme plant inside. You put the cover on top to help with the hydration and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay, a few other things to touch base on when it comes to propagation is something called rooting powder. Plants produce different hormones that signal them to grow in different ways. They have different kinds of cells and different kinds of hormones. These synthetic hormones are manufactured to help encourage new root growth. That's what they are. They are synthetic, so it's totally up to you if you want to use them. There are different kinds of rooting hormone. There are some that are more designed for softwood cuttings, some that are designed for semi-ripe cuttings or semi-hardwood, and some that are designed for hardwood cuttings. It has to do with the concentration and the strength of the hormone. So if I wanted to use rooting hormone to show you more purple sage, cut below a node, strip off all the leaves. Okay, the best thing with these, you don't want to dip into the main container because it can contaminate the rest of that. So get a little container, pour some in, swirl around your cutting, gets on there. You don't want it to be on there too thick because that can also be a problem. So after you dip it, just kind of shake it off. And then because I have one here, I'm going to space this one out. It's good to give your plants room when you are doing this. So now I'm not putting it in too deep. Make sure I have 1 to 2 nodes below the soil so it can kind of stand firm. And that's how you do that. It is good that you only have this one container of rooting hormone for one type of plant. And if you're going to move to another type of plant, get another little tray with a different for that next plant. So you're not cross-contaminating between plants. And really, I'm showing you guys all this today with one pair of snips, but it's good to harvest, say, a whole bunch of sage and do a tray of sage, and then do oregano, and then do lavender, and then do rosemary, right? And between each one, clean them off, okay? That way you're not going to get any fungus or bacteria from this one plant and giving it to the other ones. So, little tip there. Once you have your plants all nestled in, the next thing that's really important is humidity. This guy right here, you could plant it just like that. Remember we talked earlier about plants losing moisture through evaporation? By putting a little dome over top of this, we are creating a greenhouse. And that's going to mean you don't really have to water it anymore. After that initial watering, it's going to keep all the moisture inside and maybe even once in a while mist it a little bit just to help the humidity stay nice and high. but that's all you have to do until the cutting is ready. If you have a whole bunch of these, because you have a coffee addiction like me, that'll work. You can also, if you don't have little single cells like that, you can use a regular pot or get a salad container or a yogurt container, poke some holes in it. Guys, it doesn't have to cost you any money. Right now, even a lot of nurseries are going at the end of season. If you look outside, most, if not all of them, have a bin for people to recycle their nursery pots. Ask. I'm sure they'd happily let you take a few. So here I have some more of this purple sage. I just love it. So making a lot of them is not a problem for me. There are 6 cuttings inside this container. And I know it's been staying humid because my skewers have a little bit of growth on them, a little moldy. I live in Washington, it gets humid here. And then just take a simple grocery bag or any kind of plastic covering, cover it over the top, and that'll act as your humidity. Humidity, it's a fun word. If you have a big tray with a whole bunch of these, I have a few of these big domes, which are awesome because it fits over 72 cells in this size tray anyway. It has tops that can open. Now this one's pretty dirty. I need to clean it. And on the side, you can open vents on the side. But for the purpose of propagation from cuttings, you can close it up, and then this is just your itty bitty little greenhouse. Works really well. Once you have your cuttings and they are going and you have your fingers crossed that something is going to happen, what do you look for? There's a few things. If you have little trays like this, you can just pick them up and see if you see roots poking out the bottom. That's an easy way. If you have, say something like this, with a lot of stuff going on, you can actually know this one. If you tug on it ever so gently, if it resists, there are roots there. I pulled this one out so I can actually show you. I put this in here 2 weeks ago, and it has little roots on it, little purple basil. I had this tray sitting on the side of our house, and Washington has lots and lots of slugs, and the slugs got in here and ate some of my babies. Sad. So I just clipped some more and got some more going. So I have basil, lemon verbena, there's mint in here, anise hyssop, oregano, lavender, thyme, marjoram, and rosemary. All herbs, all things that can be propagated from cutting. Now from this tray, I might, depending on all of the circumstances, I might just get a handful. I might get 1, I might get 10, I might get all of them. I probably won't get all of them. Just know that when you start with this many, you might only have a handful that root, and you should be really happy about that. Many of them are gonna die, and that's okay. The stages of rooting, before the roots form, I can show you one more thing. This is Monarda, or bee balm, and it has calluses forming at the bottom. Now these little white spots down here, when it calluses, that is a sign that very soon you're going to have roots coming out of that. So you have the bare stem, callusing forms, and the next stage is rooting. Once you have your rooted plants, pot them up into something bigger, let them grow on. At this stage, you can harden them off so they can just be outside the landscape. That means, so if they're covered, they're nice and protected, they don't have the wind, they don't have pests. In the spring, like with seedlings, you don't want to just throw them outside or they will die. Same thing with cuttings. You want to put them outside for short periods of time and then lengthen that time every couple of days, and in maybe 3 or 4 days, they will be fine. This little rosemary is fully rooted. I can pull on it and it's not coming out. And yeah, this guy has got new growth on it. I'm very happy with this one. It looks great. When you have these little baby herbs, you could try just planting them in the landscape. This late in the season, the days are getting shorter, getting cooler. It might not survive the winter. So I advise keep them in a protected place that first winter. Make sure you're tending to them, grow them on, and then in the spring, they'll be ready for the landscape. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. Like this plant, this is lemon verbena. I love this for tea. It smells so good. This one I did from cutting as well. And this plant is not hardy where I live. But last winter I had 2 of them that grew really well through the season. I put them in a big 5-gallon pots, put them in a protected area and overwintered them. And in the spring, I took some cuttings and now I have more plants. So this guy, for sure, I would have to put in a protected place because I know if I left it outside, it would die. So know your plants, know what they like, and treat them accordingly. Now that you have all of your cuttings all tucked in, nice and happy and covered, where do you put them? You want to keep them in indirect sun. You don't want to put them in a bright sunny window. I had mine sitting, I went to a neighbor's house and got some beautiful cuttings, and I left the tray of cuttings on my front porch, which gets full sun until, well, noon, right? And I went out the next day and they were all completely limp and dead. I lost them all. So don't do that. Keep them in indirect light. Inside is great, a bright, sunny window. If you have underneath the tree, good shade canopy, that's great. Even something north facing might even be good. Just kind of watch your plants, see how they react. If they start really wilting, then you know you might want to adjust the light or the heat. When it comes to heat, your optimum temperature is going to be between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when the plants are actively growing and they're gonna try and grow roots. If it gets too cold, they might get a little sleepy and might not root for you. And conversely, if they get too hot, they'll get too stressed and dehydrate and die. So keep that in mind. Nice median range of temperature and indirect light, and you should be good to go. With that, I really hope you guys try this. I hope that you grow some lemon verbena and maybe a hydrangea or 2 or 20 like I did. Have fun with it. And once you get the hang of it, like I said, you can do so many things. Let me know in the comments below, tag me in things, check me out on Instagram. I would love to see what you try. And if you have questions, I'm happy to help. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.